Part 2: The Crocodile and the Sword, 1927 to 1932. New Guinea is a big body of land. It is the second largest island in the world. Around this mainland, there are hundreds of small islands. One of these, the place I was headed for, was called New Britain, but it was part of the general area known as the New Guinea Territory. After World War I, the League of Nations ceded control of New Guinea to Britain. Until 1914, much of the region was under German domination, and Germans owned the plantations and ran the economy of the land. Now, Australians were taking over, as part of the loot of the war, and I was on my way. My boat would land at Rabaul, 400 miles from the New Guinea mainland. The problem was how to get to the mainland where the gold rush was on. How do you do this with about £2 in your pocket, making a not very loud jingle? All I had with which to face this new world was what I stood up in. On board ship, I became friendly with another man named Johnson, who was headed for New Guinea to become a postmaster in the government service. I also got acquainted with a woman whose husband was a district officer. She gave me a letter of introduction that would be of use when I got to Rabaul. I had to sleep under a native house on my first night in New Guinea. It was nice and warm there, but the mosquitoes seemed a different and more interested breed than I met anywhere else. As I slept or tried to sleep, I worried about my new nice white clothes, which I had preserved carefully because I hoped to get an interview with the government secretary and perhaps land a job as a cadet. These cadets were young men appointed from Sydney by the government. There were 6 in New Guinea, of various qualifications. They were embryo district officers. Whoever had that job was the big wheel of a whole district. It took years to become such a magistrate, and in the meantime, they trained the young fellows to go out into the jungle and look to the natives' benefit. I hoped I could talk my way into one of those spots. I got the interview with the government secretary. He was a big joker, heavy-set and self-important. I introduced myself, mentioned the name of Johnson, the man I'd met on board ship, and topped it off with dropping the name of my father's eminent colleague, Professor Channery. "What do you know about sanitation?" he asked. "Sanitation? Why, of course, everything." I babbled and blustered what I had read in my father's books about hygiene, the diseases of the natives, of bacteria, water, jabbered on like a con man. Absurd to ask me a question like that. I was hired on probation basis, pending confirmation from Australia, the salary £4 a week. My job was to go about in a government car, accompanied by 2 armed native policemen. We were to travel to the villages and look to the sanitation. That what I did, dressed in a white suit, wore a white helmet, carried a walking stick, looked very clean, tall, and official. I boned up on a pamphlet that told me what to look for among the natives and how to help them. One item showed how to make soap out of coconuts. The government wouldn't issue soap, but I was to teach the natives how to make it and how it cleaned them and their clothes and destroyed germs. The age-old way was the age-old way to wash clothes was to beat them with a rock against another rock in the river. I got them to make this soap. It was primitively done, yet the process was not much different from the method employed by the soap manufacturers today. And I went after them about other things. Why were the pigs allowed to live under the huts? What was the dead dog doing lying there instead of being buried? Why didn't they dig a deep hole for the latrines? Didn't they know all this led to disease? Of course they didn't, and my job was to teach them. I lived in a primitive bungalow with 3 other cadets who were already confirmed in their appointments. They were all very British in manner, and the little hut was rather like a junior league British Army subalterns quarters. Junior League British Army subalterns quarters in some outcoastal empire spot. Our orderlies stood at attention when we came by and presented arms when we came and went. Naturally, the work soon became a bore. The highlight of my inspection route was a lovely little native swimming hole. I swiftly figured to hell with sanitation. For a while, it could wait. I would run over to this place, skillfully camouflage my car in the bush, and dive into that lovely green bordered waterhole for 2 or 3 hours a day. A half Malaysian Polynesian girl swam there. Her name was Mara, and she was divine. She was married to one of the high government officials. Mora was one of the most beautiful women I ever saw, honey-skinned, with freckles, long wavy hair, and a waist you could span with your two hands. Naturally, my ambition was to spend as much time spanning it as I could. She was gay, carefree, and it appeared as the days went by, unhappily married. One day I set out on patrol, but parked the car carefully out of sight and hurried as fast as I could, carrying my swim trunks. There she was, in the water, and I immediately got undressed. I dived and came up on the other side, staring right into the face of the government secretary himself, the man who hired me. "Flynn," he said, "is this how you conduct your sanitary duties?" There was nothing to say. "Report to my office tomorrow at 9 o'clock. With that, he turned and went off. I knew I'd had it. I murmured to Mora that I was only on probation. That's the end of me for sure. She looked stricken. She felt somehow, she said, that it was her fault. She was sorry. She said, "Perhaps I can do something. I will tell you what. My husband goes to a meeting tonight. You can come to my bungalow and we'll find out something. But you'll have to come very quietly. We don't want anyone to see you, do we?" "Sure as hell we didn't," I agreed. "When you come up the veranda," she said, "take your shoes off, and I'll be waiting for you." "How will I know it's you?" "Don't worry." She was splendid there in the sunset. She wore a strange kind of swimsuit, which I had never seen before. A filminess to it that showed the outline of her body. Highly colored, and it clung to her as if she had been draped into it with a spray gun. Her eyes were big and wide, dark and worried. I felt grateful to her, but terribly depressed. Tomorrow I was finished. Gloomily, I returned to my quarters with my two native policemen. Still, they presented arms, in the usual fashion, and I figured that was the last time I would have the funny little feeling of importance I got when arms were presented. That night I followed instructions. I barefooted into the bungalow, practically crept inside. There was absolutely no talk of my situation as a failing cadet. She was in a mood of sympathy, pity, kindness, tenderness, the scent of her, the scent of native tropical flowers, the satin skin, a sort of honey-colored complexion, with little freckles, her soft hair, and the softness of her lips. The passion. One of my most wonderful nights. The second blow fell. We had lapsed into complete forgetfulness of time when her husband came in. After the first shouts died down, he slugged me. I never had a chance, even though I was in the best fighting form and in the best physical condition. He was big, stocky, enraged. I was swiftly on the defensive. She tried to get between us, and his fist roundhouse punch caught her right in the face. She went flat. I started for him and caught the second roundhouse. I went flat in the opposite direction. He put the boot into me and kicked into the ribs. He put the boot into me and kicked in 3 ribs. He kept putting the boot on, and as I came to, I could still feel him trying to gouge out my eyes with his heel. I bit him in the leg, took a great chunk out of the back of his calf, and he let out a scream. I got up, took a vase, threw it, missed. He came charging again. I got out of the way somehow and tripped him. Down he went. As he started to rise, I figured that, since I could hardly stand up by this time, now was the moment to make a dignified exit. I caught him with my knee just the right instant as he was getting up, right in the teeth, a tremendous whack. Then caught him a second time in the same spot, a smashing whack on the jaw with my knee, and it was all over. You must remember that Australians fight for keeps, and I had learned that the hard way. Marquess of Queensberry rules were not for me, especially if you were caught on the defensive and guilty as hell of being the most unwanted type of intruder in the lexicon of men's morals. Having received the old boot, as we called it in Australia, he lay there prone, hurt but conscious, and trying to rise. My face must have looked like it had been caught in a paddle wheel of a steamboat. I felt like that, as if all of me had been caught in that wheel. I ached all over. I went over to Mora as quickly as I could and lifted her up, but she was out. I stood there glaring at this guy, and he glaring at me, both of us completely breathless, winded. He managed to get to his feet as a drunken man would, but rage stood him erect. I stared at the drooping and smashed jaw. He said, "Get out of here unless you want me to kill you." "I don't know what you're going to kill me with, but be damn sure you won't miss. You don't miss," he muttered. "What's going to happen to her?" I should have left him, but instead I said something I shouldn't have said. "I'll take care of her." "No, you won't." "All right, we'll both take care of her," I said. "What end are you going to take, top or bottom?" He said he would take the bottom. I lifted her head up very carefully. He lifted her feet, and together we carried her into the bed. "Get some water," he said. How the hell can I when I don't know where I am?" "That's a likely story. What the hell are you doing here if you don't know where you are?" "I mean, I don't know where the kitchen is," I said. "Do something for her. She looks hurt." "What about me?" he asked. "What about me? We're all hurt." Then I said, "Let's go together." We went to the kitchen, got some hot water, and put compresses on Mora. But still, I dared not turn my back on him. I felt the rage still burning in him. He might let fly again any instant. I put my clothes on, keeping an eye on him. Then I backed out. Next morning, I confronted the government secretary as ordered. I felt impossibly low, as if everything was cracked from under me. I figured simply to be fired, but the fellow was wearing an altogether different expression from what I'd expected to see. Strangely, his face has a rather pleased look. He opened with a slight smile. "You know, Flynn, I often feel like a swim myself, but I do my swimming in my own time. When I entered the government service, I certainly didn't swim in government time. That is why I'm here today." I nodded, acknowledging his great success. "Of course, this is unforgivable, especially as you are on probation. After all, your appointment has never been confirmed. There is no alternative for you. You have to go." I nodded again. "But as if that were not enough," he went on, "you have to fall foul of an officer of the government. Have you any explanation for that?" "No, sir. Just what you can see on my face. Looks like he gave you a good going over." Then he shouted, "As if one thing is not enough." Yet there was a glint of amusement in his face. "You have to do this to one of our top government officials, breaking down his door, go bursting in there, and desecrating his home." He went on to say that the man had a broken jaw, and that Mara was in the hospital with a nervous breakdown. What kind of man are you in the government service, Flynn? A bewildered but pleasant feeling came over me, because I could sense something else coming besides dismissal. You should be summarily dismissed. But instead of that, Flynn, until your appointment is ratified, which should be any day now, I will overlook this, of course, on a promise of proper behavior in the future. Listening to him, it sounded like a reprieve. Obviously, he had a hate on for Mora's husband, and he was delighted to hear of what had happened at the bungalow. All I had to do was stay on, get a confirmation from Canberra, the Australian capital, and I might someday be a government administrator, even a full district officer, spending a quarter century of my life in the middle of the fields and the jungles with nobody to talk to. Yet these fellows were heroes, the true rulers of New Guinea, and at the moment a stay of dismissal appeared a great thing. However, he said, I'm changing your assignment for you. We are taking you off sanitary duty. There will be no more swimming for you for a good while. He explained that there had been a massacre at Ma Dang. I was going there, under District Officer Taylor, to serve as one of his subordinates. 4 prospectors had been killed, and the culprits who murdered them must be brought in. This was not exactly a sentence to Siberia. Here he gave me a funny look as though to say, You didn't expect this, did you, young fellow? I thanked him and said I would try to do better in the future. Still, I couldn't figure it out, beyond the surmise that Mara's husband must have been on the drop dead list of the government secretary. He gave me one final direction. I must report on the government schooner leaving from Rabaul and go to the headquarters of District Officer Taylor. One more thing, he said. I must warn you not to say goodbye to the young lady before you leave. Her husband will certainly shoot you. I've been told, even if he has to get up out of his hospital bed to do it. This was my first experience with an irate husband.